Hi, my name's Becky and I teach creative digital design here at Yoobee Auckland. Today I'm going to take you through putting mock-ups together. So these are something we use when presenting to clients and for portfolio work. They take our logo design or our illustrations and put them in real life situations. Why we do this is because it really shows off how these designs come to life. And a lot of the time you'll find that clients aren't the most visual of people. So this can really wow them. It can really show them how a logo you'll put together or an image that they've commissioned will look in a real life situation. So that's great. Today I'm going to take you through using more of an illustration. And that is because it's really bold, so you'll see what I'm doing quite easily. So we're going to jump over to Photoshop and I'll show you how we're going to do this. So now you can see we're here in Photoshop and I've gone and got an image of a shop here. You want to get these from copyright-free sites like Unsplash, Pixabay, or anything that's like a mock-up site can also be really useful. But you want to make sure you are actually allowed to use the image. And what you'll find is a lot of the time, these aren't perfect. They're not exactly what we want. Today, I'm going to make this more like an ice cream store. So you can see, obviously, at the moment, I don't want motel apartments on there. That doesn't work for what I'm putting together. But that's okay because that's why we're making a mock-up so that we can make it exactly what we want to be. So what I'm aiming to do today is put a little sign in here and then also put a mural on the wall. So I'm going to start with my sign. I will need to get rid of the sign that's here at the moment. And my aim, as much as I can, is to use non-destructive Photoshop techniques. So I'll talk you through what I mean as we go there. The first thing I'm going to do though, is you'll see I've already made a copy of this image down here. And that's because I want to keep the original image, just so if I muck anything up, I still have that there. This is also something I really recommend if I had already color graded this and put some time into it. I don't want to muck up and then lose all of the hard work I've already put in. So I'm going to make sure I just make a copy, and to do that all you need to do is hold down Command or Alt, depending if you're on Mac or PC, and drag that down, and that would make an extra copy. So I've already done that, so I'm going to turn on this top layer here, and first things first, I want to get rid of this sign. So I'm going to zoom in. Now you can do this in two ways. A lot of the time I would say I would use a clone stamp, and that is because you can see up here it's a little bit lighter than it is down here. And if you've ever used the clone stamp, you know that you have to be really careful because it is going to select from a certain area and you have to pay attention to what you're doing. For this though, it's pretty even, so I'm going to see if I can get away with using a paintbrush. If you were doing something in nature, you'd never use a paintbrush because it just doesn't do the job right. But anything that is like a solid sign can be the quicker way to do it. So it's always a case by case. So what I'm going to do first is select this color with my eyedrop. So I'm going to hopefully get the best match I can. And if this doesn't match up, then I will jump back to my clone stamp, but I'm hoping I can get away with it today. And I'm just going to essentially color out what is in here. Now it's not perfectly even, and I don't mind too much because I'm not going to rely on this. This is just for blending purposes later on. So I can just make the whole sign one color if I want. Just make sure I can get it as even as possible. And you can see because I'm just literally painting on top of this image, if I didn't have a spare copy and it all went really badly, as it sometimes does if we're not really paying enough attention, or we just try something and it doesn't always work, that's why I've got that extra copy there. Okay, so that's looking all right. And I'm just going to make another copy of this now that it's done. I've got my saved copy there. I'm going to turn that off. That's always just there as a backup. So again, holding down Option or Alt and pulling that down. and now I've got 2 copies, so I can turn that bottom one off. Now, as I said before, we want to bring in an image. So let me just zoom out so we can see the whole thing. And I'm going to use something called the vanishing point filter for this. Now what this does is, you can see this is on a bit of a perspective lean. This could be really hard. We could use a perspective tool. There's always, multiple ways to do some in Photoshop. But what I find really useful is the vanishing point filter. It kind of just puts it in there for me. But before we can use that, we need to select our image we're going to use. So I've got a few illustrations here to pick from. And I think for a sign, this one here could work as a sign. Otherwise, you can obviously use your illustration and put whatever mock-up of a sign you need together first, but I think this will work fine. So I've selected it, I'm just gonna copy that, and then I'm gonna go up to filter and go to vanishing point. It's gonna take you into this pop-up here, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna essentially place some dots across where we would want this to sit. Now you're only going to get 4 points, so this isn't a tool that's going to be useful in every occasion, but for something like a wall, it's really great. So I'm just going to take this to maybe 50%. Let's see how zoomed in that gives us. Because I want to make sure I'm putting these points in the right place. Now you can see there's some curves here. Because I've only got the 4 points and I can't control them that much, I'm going to kind of overdo it and then I will mask out later. So I might actually go for the outside. Let me grab my points. And I'm just going to make it bigger than it needs to be so that I can just mask out. And this again is a destructive technique. Once my picture's in here, that's it, it's kind of embedded. So I've got my copy though, so it doesn't really matter because I can jump back if I don't like it. All right, so you can see it's making this perspective band and I can adjust it if I'm not quite happy with it. If it's blue, it's deciding for us that it thinks it's an okay angle. If I go over here, red, don't go with it, it's not really working. All right, so I've got my blue. Let's zoom out again, see the whole thing. And then I'm going to paste in the image I want to use. Now be aware with this, obviously we're going to need to adjust it a little bit to fit in here properly. But it doesn't use Photoshop's technique of just being able to adjust without distorting it. So you do need to be holding down Shift when you do that adjustment. So to get that transformation up, we just go down and we click here and you can see the transformation comes up. Now hold down Shift, otherwise it will get distorted. And just pull it out. And then I can just kind of move around to where I think it's going to sit right. Obviously this isn't kind of fitting perfectly. With any mock-up, what you'll find is the square kind of you used for your illustration might not fit the mock-up square. So you could go into your illustration, expand that background, change the sizing a bit. For demo's sake, I'm not going to bother with that, but that is something that you just have to take into consideration. I'm going to press OK. And then it's put it in the right perspective. Obviously, it's not really integrating right now because I did overdo it, but that's because I know I can just mask it out. Now, when I say mask, if you haven't used it before, it's kind of like a form of cutting, but where I'll always mask over cut is because it's non-destructive. So when I say non-destructive, it means I can do something and I can always bring it back. If you are to just go cut, that's kind of it. You've cut and you can use your eraser, but you can't bring anything back. So masking is a technique that does the same thing but allows so much more out of it. So to do that, I'm going to just turn on this bottom layer again so I can see how it used to be. And I'm going to bring the opacity right down. So you can see I can see that background now. And I just want to make sure I mask so that that nice grey border is around there. So again, let's zoom in so we can see what we're doing. And essentially, I'm just going to cut all that background out. Now, you can do this in multiple ways. We've got lasso tools, we've got selection, we've got object select. These are all great. It's really personal preference and project to project. I generally will go with my pen tool, partly if you're used to Illustrator. This is super easy. If you're not, it does take a little bit of time. But this will give me the most accurate selection. So I can kind of get around all these curves quite accurately. And the great thing about a mask is that if I don't get it perfect, I can adjust it later. Unlike a cut that if you have been cutting, you'll kind of notice if you don't get it perfect that first time, it can be really hard. Those edges can be really harsh, or you might have not quite selected enough, and it makes your life quite hard. So definitely recommend a mask. Once you start using them, you'll realize that you'll save yourself a lot of headaches. And I'm only going to show you little bits of why a mask works today. The more you use them, the more you'll see all the nice little features Photoshop gives you with them. And select it in here. Now, as you can see, this doesn't make a selection automatically. I do need to right click and go down and make selection. Okay, and now that's in there. Now I'm just going to bring the opacity up so you can kind of see what this is doing. So I've selected this bit. You can see as soon as I press down here, which is going to make my mask. So this button here, once pressed, I'm going to take all that out, place it inside. So that is looking great. Now, if I hadn't done the job as well as I wanted, where I'm saying it's non-destructive, I can go in and see this little bit here, right? I think I've gone too much over the edge. I can grab my paintbrush, make sure I'm on the mask layer, which is the black and white layer, and just go straight in and use that and just erase it. Now, obviously now I've erased too much, not to worry. I'm going to chuck it to my white paintbrush, put my paintbrush down a little bit, and just draw it back in. So you can see you can draw in, take out as many times as you want, because all a mask is doing is actually, it hasn't cut it, it's just hidden part of it. So that means you can bring it back in. So this is a great way to kind of just be mistake free. And this is what we call a non-destructive technique. Awesome, so that's in there now. But I still feel like it's kind of obvious I placed it. So this is where we need to use some blending modes. And there's multiple ways to blend. I'm going to show you the simplest kind of beginning way. Other ways later on, when you get to more complex mockups or just Photoshop in general, you can bring in shadow and lighting. Shadow also, it always does make a huge difference in making something feel really real. And you could also bring in layering, so putting something in front of something else really makes it feel embedded. All we're going to do is have a little play with some blending modes. So I'm going to grab this down here. I'm just going to make a copy because I do need an extra copy later on. And I'm going to bring this copy on top. Now it's going to make it look like I just made everything disappear. I didn't, it's fine, don't stress. Just paste this on top. And why I did that is because then I can use these blending modes. So if you click on what says normal here, you can go through and you can see if I darken it, it's kind of blending the colors in more. So I think a multiply generally is a good method. As you can see, it's doing it to the whole picture though, and I don't really want that to happen. I just want it to attach to the sign. Now to do that, the easiest way is, again, hold on your Alt or Option, and you'll see that this arrow comes up. That's going to connect it to the mask below, and so that blending mode will only attach to the mask below. And there you go. Now it's looking a little bit more real, right? So you could add more and more blending modes to this, but I'm quite happy at the moment just leaving it as is. And we're going to put a mirror in the background. So again, we're going to use a vanishing point, and then we're going to have to use a mask to bring certain layers back in, because the vanishing point will just place it over the whole thing. Because we've got this, we're going to actually work on the layer below because the wall is behind the sign. So anything above needs to be on the top layer, anything behind needs to be essentially below it. So we've got our layer here that is sitting down at the bottom. And again, let's just, because this is my last one that has been taking the sign away, I want to just keep that original copy. So you can, I mean, it doesn't matter how many times you multiply a layer. You can always just delete them later. You can turn them on and off. So just for safety, let's make another one. And then I need to select my picture, right? So let's go through. This is my sign, so I don't really want to use that one again. I think this one is going to be better. So I'm just going to select all, copy, and then let's jump into a vanishing point. So make sure you're on the right layer. It's the whole picture just underneath the sign. And go to vanishing point. What you'll see is we did a vanishing point before, so it's remembered it, which is great, but we want it to be different. So you can either make a new one by just clicking create a panel tool, or you could adjust this one. I'm going to create a new one just because it's easier. And there we go. We're going to chuck this in here. Nice and easy. And now it's going to go across that whole wall. So I'm going to paste my picture in. Now, as soon as I put it into here, obviously then it goes to that angle. So you can make your adjustment outside. Sometimes it's a little bit easier, especially if you're, and here it doesn't really matter because my picture is smaller, but if your picture is bigger than the space you're putting in, I do recommend trying to adjust it before you get it in there, or it can be kind of difficult. So hold down shift and let's move it. And then I'm going to have to move it up because this is quite a big space, and just keep pulling it. Now I'm not worried that obviously this is going to end up having to be off the page to fit that square because the building's off the page. So it would make sense that the whole picture isn't showing, that some of it would be where your eye can't see at the moment. So you can think about stuff like that, is what would be in the rest of the picture that we can't see right now, because that's what makes it realistic, is that some of the picture isn't shown because the whole building isn't shown. So I can have the end of the cones, and your viewer's mind will presume that that's underneath on the rest of the building. I'm quite happy with that, so let's press OK. Now automatically it is putting those layers on top, but it looks a bit silly at the moment because obviously it's not blended in. That doesn't really work. Now what I can try at the start, and you can also put this as a blending mode, so I can go multiply, and that's going to bring in this bottom layer, and it's going to attach my image that I just put in to the bottom layer as the blending. So multiply works. Oh, I think darken might be a little bit better though in this case. So it can be either. But you can see that obviously because it's just blending, so it's kind of changing the opacity. It's not all working, so I'm going to have to mask that. And I can even bring that blending mode down a little bit so you can see with my opacity I can adjust it even more of how much I actually want the picture in there. Or you could choose other blending modes. Multiply is going to show a little bit more as you go through. Okay, and because the sun is kind of coming in, it doesn't really matter that it sometimes may look a little bit imperfect, but generally when you put stuff on a building it is, so that can also help with the realism. Now this time with a mask, you don't actually always have to have a selection. You could just mask the whole thing, which allows you to paint in and out. So all I'm going to do is literally click the button and then decide which bits I need to paint in and out. So you can see that if I zoom in here, this is going across. I don't want that. I don't want the yellow inside the window. And then obviously I need to fix up this. So I'm going to bring that opacity down a little bit so I can see the picture underneath. And then I'm going to jump in, use my black paintbrush and paint out. Now because the opacity is down, you might find when you turn it back on that you've painted a little too much, but it does help me see that background a bit better. So I can turn this up, see how I'm going. Yeah, that's looking already much better. Now this, I definitely need the opacity down because I can't see the edge here. I want to make sure we give life to our sign as well. I don't think our balcony was affected, but we will double check that when we turn our opacity back up. Now you can see I'm getting a bit of a spill, so I will have to bring, with a smaller brush, some of this colour back in because that doesn't look overly realistic. But if I zoom out, oh yes, we do need to fix the balcony a tiny bit, but that's looking better. There is quite a lot of spill, like opacity on this section, but again, if the light is hitting it might not look as good, and we can always just choose a different blending mode later. We're just getting it ready. So with Photoshop, the hard thing when you're learning is there's no one way to do stuff, and you jump into another picture, a darken or a multiply might not be the blending mode you need. So it is just a bit of trial and error, trying different stuff out and seeing which suits the picture you're working on at the time. All right, so now I'm going to change to white and try just bring some of this back in. That's better. Now just make sure you be patient with yourself when you're in Photoshop. The worst thing to do is try rush it. That's when you find that it's really hard to get clean lines. So a lot of the time when you watch YouTube tutorials, they go through really fast. It's because they've fast forwarded it or they've done it a million times. Don't expect that you have to get it first try. You might need to tinker at it for a while, and that's perfectly fine. Right, that's looking a bit better. I would still tinker away at the side here. And I might try some different blending modes to see if that's definitely the one I really want to use. Maybe I do want to use multiply and just take it out a bit on the roof there. That is your base, your vanishing point, your masking, and your blending. So hopefully you can give this a try at home and have some success. Thank you for watching.